I woke up to the sound of a jackhammer. Not a distant, annoying one, but an earth-shaking, window-rattling jackhammer. On my property. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest as I threw off my blankets and rushed to the window. The sight that met my eyes was so absurd, so downright insane, that for a second I thought I was dreaming. A full-fledged construction crew had set up camp on my land. Trucks, bulldozers, men in hard hats. And right in the middle of it all, a brand new road was being paved, straight through my property. For a moment I just stood there, blinking at the chaos like an idiot. Then reality hit me like a freight train. Someone was building a road on my land without my permission. And judging by the uniforms, the neatly parked HOA-branded trucks, and the obnoxiously smug woman barking orders at the workers, I knew exactly who was behind this. Karen McMann, the president of the HOA. A woman who had made it her life's mission to control anything and everything in this neighborhood, even things that had nothing to do with her. I stormed outside in my pajamas, waving my arms like a madman. Hey! What the hell is going on here? One of the construction workers turned, gave me a glance, and just shrugged. Talk to the HOA. Oh, I will, I growled, shoving past the workers and marching straight up to Karen, who was standing with her arms crossed, watching the road take shape like some kind of dictator overseeing her latest conquest. Karen! I snapped, my blood boiling. What the hell is this? You can't just build a road on my property. Karen turned slowly, her face stretching into a plastic smile. Oh, Jack. Good morning. Lovely day, isn't it? My jaw tightened. Cut the crap, Karen. Why is there a road being built on my land? She sighed dramatically, like I was some petulant child throwing a tantrum over nothing. Jack, we had a meeting about this. I stared at her, dumbfounded. A meeting? A meeting that I wasn't part of? About my land. She nodded, unfazed. It was a unanimous decision by the HOA board. We needed better access for the community. Your land was the perfect place to extend the road. I let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. Are you hearing yourself? This is private property. You can't just take my land and slap a road on it because it's convenient for you. Karen waved a hand, dismissing my outrage like it was nothing more than background noise. Jack, don't be so dramatic. It's just a road. It benefits everyone. It's for the greater good. The sheer audacity of this woman nearly made my eye twitch. The greater good? The greater good? You trespassed onto my land, dug up my property, and built a road without so much as a phone call. This isn't a favor, Karen, this is theft. She sighed again, tilting her head like I was a particularly slow student. Oh, Jack. You're being unreasonable. The road is almost finished, so there's really no point in fighting it now. You should be happy. Your property value just went up. I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. You think I give a damn about property value when I have a road running through my yard? Karen patted my shoulder like I was a fussy toddler. Well, it's done now. Just try to see the bigger picture. I stared at her, words failing me. This wasn't just arrogance. This was something else entirely. A level of entitlement so deep, so utterly detached from reality, that I almost admired it. Almost. But then I remembered that I was the one getting screwed here. Without another word, I turned on my heel and stormed back inside, my heart pounding with rage. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only person who could make sense of this legal circus. My lawyer, Greg. It took one conversation, one look at the land deed, one furious string of legal jargon, to confirm what I already suspected. The HOA had absolutely no legal right to build that road. None. My land was mine, and they had waltzed in like they owned the place. Greg's voice was calm but laced with controlled anger. Jack, this is a textbook case of property violation. You can sue them for damages, force them to remove the road, or... I cut him off, an idea forming in my mind. A brilliant, petty, beautifully devious idea. Or... Greg hesitated. Or you could use the road to your advantage. A slow grin spread across my face. How legal would it be if I, say, turned the road into a private tollway? There was a brief pause, then a chuckle. Jack, if they built it on your property without permission, then you can do whatever you want with it. They gave you a free road. You just have to make it work for you. That was all I needed to hear. The rage burning in my chest began to morph into something else, something sharper, more controlled. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, then fine. I'd play dirtier. By the time I hung up the phone, my plan was already in motion. The next morning, the HOA members woke up to find something they never expected. A giant, gleaming toll booth standing proudly at the entrance of my new private road. A massive sign hung above it. Private property. Pay toll to enter. A second sign, positioned directly in front of Karen's house, read, "No HOA exemptions. $5 per vehicle." And just like that, the war had begun. The toll booth was a thing of beauty. A sturdy little structure with a sliding window, a ticket machine, and a bright red barrier arm that lowered across the newly paved road. I had spent the entire previous day overseeing its construction, making sure it was as official-looking as possible. The best part? It was entirely legal. If the HOA wanted to build a road through my property, they were going to pay for the privilege of using it. The first car to roll up to the booth that morning was a sleek silver SUV, driven by none other than Karen McMann herself. She didn't even slow down as she approached, clearly expecting the road to be as free and open as it had been yesterday. But then she saw it. The barrier arm, the toll sign, the small, smug grin on my face as I leaned out of the booth window. Her car screeched to a halt inches from the barrier. For a moment she just sat there, staring at me in stunned silence. Then she rolled down her window, her face already twisting into an expression of pure outrage. "Jack," she said slowly, as if she were speaking to an unruly child. "What is this?" I tapped the sign beside me. "Toll road. $5 per vehicle." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't be serious." I shrugged. "Completely serious. This is private property, Karen. You built a road on it. Now it's a toll road." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is absurd. You can't just charge people to use the road." "Actually, I can," I said, leaning forward on the counter. "You see, unlike the HOA, I actually own this land, which means I get to decide what happens on it. And right now, I'm deciding that it costs $5 to drive through." Her nostrils flared. "This is extortion." "No, this is capitalism," I said cheerfully. "You know, the thing you love to talk about when you raise HOA fees." She clenched the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. "I'm not paying you a dime." "That's fine," I said with a shrug. "Feel free to turn around and take another route." Her jaw tightened. She knew as well as I did that the next closest route out of the neighborhood was a 5-mile detour. It wasn't impossible, but it was inconvenient. And Karen hated inconvenience. For a long moment she just sat there, breathing heavily through her nose. Then, without another word, she put her car in reverse, spun it around, and sped off back toward her house. I waved after her, then turned my attention to the next car in line. Unlike Karen, this driver was a middle-aged man in a minivan who looked more confused than outraged. He rolled down his window and squinted at me. Is this real?" "Yep," I said, holding up a roll of printed toll receipts. $5. He frowned but reached for his wallet anyway. "This HOA is out of control, man." I chuckled as I handed him his receipt. "Tell me about it." By noon, word had spread. Some people paid the toll begrudgingly, some turned around in frustration, and some, mostly the younger crowd, found the entire thing hilarious. A few even gave me tips for sticking it to the HOA. Then, right on schedule, the HOA board arrived in full force. A small mob of angry middle-aged homeowners marched up to my toll booth, led by Karen, who was practically vibrating with rage. "This is an illegal obstruction," she shouted the moment she was within earshot. You have no right to do this. I leaned against the window, completely unbothered. I have every right, actually. Would you like to see the property deed? Karen's eyes burned with hatred. You can't charge people to use this road. It was meant for the community. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, so now you're admitting you built it without my permission? A few of the HOA members glanced at each other uneasily. Karen quickly backtracked. That's not what I meant. The point is, you're disrupting the neighborhood. I shrugged. Not my problem. The road's on my land, which means I get to control it. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. We'll take this to court. Go ahead, I said. I have a lawyer, too. And unlike your HOA board, he actually knows property law. The crowd murmured. Some of them, clearly realizing they were on the losing side of this argument, started to drift away. Karen, however, wasn't finished. You think you're so clever, she hissed. But this won't last. The HOA will not stand for this kind of behavior. I smiled. Oh, I'm counting on that. That afternoon, I made some upgrade. I installed a security camera, put up a sign that read "No HOA exemptions," and even started offering prepaid monthly passes for anyone who wanted a discount. A few of my non-HOA neighbors found the whole thing so entertaining that they actually bought the passes just to support me. The HOA, meanwhile, was losing its mind. They tried everything to shut me down. First, they sent cease and desist letters, which my lawyer shredded with ease. Then, they tried reporting me to the city, but since the road was on private land, there was nothing the city could do. The next morning, Karen tried a new tactic, parking her car sideways in front of the toll booth to block other vehicles from using it. She stood there with her arms crossed, daring me to do something about it. So I did. I called a tow truck. The moment she realized what was happening, she practically threw herself in front of the vehicle. "This is harassment," she shrieked. "Nope," I said, holding up my phone where I had recorded the whole thing. "This is you blocking a private business." She sputtered, looking around desperately for support. But the other HOA members were already backing away, not wanting to get involved. Eventually, she had no choice but to move her car. Over the next few days, the toll road became a local legend. People started driving through just to take pictures. One guy even asked if he could propose to his girlfriend at the booth, because he thought the whole thing was so funny. Karen, of course, was getting more and more desperate. When legal threats and intimidation didn't work, she resorted to good old-fashioned pettiness. She started spreading rumors about me, claiming I was a scam artist, a criminal, even a menace to society. But none of it mattered, because at the end of the day, I wasn't the one who had built a road on someone else's land without permission. I was just the guy making them pay for it. The HOA was livid. The toll road had become the talk of the neighborhood, and while some people found it hilarious, the HOA board saw it as a full-blown war. Karen, in particular, had taken it as a personal attack, and I knew she wouldn't stop until she found a way to make my life miserable. But I was ready for her. She had already played her hand when she built the road without my permission. Now it was my turn to turn the screws. A few days after the toll booth's grand debut, I got a letter from the HOA's lawyer. It was a cease and desist notice, filled with big legal words meant to scare me. According to them, my toll booth was an unauthorized obstruction and disruptive to the peaceful flow of the community. I almost laughed. It was a nice attempt, but they had no legal ground to stand on. The HOA had built the road illegally on my land. If anything, I should have been the one suing them. I took the letter straight to Greg, my lawyer, and he skimmed through it with an amused grin. "This is nonsense," he said, flipping the page over like it was a grocery store flyer. "They're bluffing. They can't do anything unless they can prove the road belongs to them, which they can't because it doesn't." "Should I even bother responding?" I asked. Greg leaned back in his chair. "Nah. Let them waste their money on more legal threats. If they actually try to sue, we'll counter with a lawsuit of our own for property damage and illegal land use. That was good enough for me. I tossed the letter in the trash and went about my day, knowing full well that Karen wouldn't stop there. The next move came fast. The HOA started sending emails and letters to all the residents, warning them not to use my toll road. They called it an unfair exploitation of community members, and claimed that I was holding the neighborhood hostage for financial gain. I had to admit it was a creative way to spin the situation. The irony, of course, was that the HOA itself had been squeezing money out of homeowners for years, raising fees for maintenance and fines for things as small as the wrong shade of mailbox. I figured the smear campaign wouldn't work, and for the most part, I was right. Sure, some people grumbled about paying the toll, but plenty of others found it funny. A few of my neighbors even stopped by to shake my hand and tell me they were rooting for me. One guy, an older man named Tom, had been feuding with the HOA for years over some nonsense about the color of his shutters. He bought a monthly pass just to spite Karen. But Karen wasn't done. One morning, I woke up to find a new construction crew setting up shop just down the road from my property. They had trucks, surveying equipment, and a couple of workers milling around, looking busy. I had a bad feeling about it, so I walked over to see what was going on. One of the workers glanced at me, then looked at his clipboard. "You Jack Dawson?" "Yeah." "What's all this?" He scratched the back of his head. "HOA hired us to survey the area. They're planning to build a new road." I almost laughed out loud. They were trying to build a detour around my toll road. It was such a desperate move that I actually had to admire it. But there was one little problem. The land they were planning to build on? It wasn't HOA property. It belonged to the city, and from what I knew, getting approval for a new road wasn't as easy as just calling up a construction company. I turned on my heel and headed straight for City Hall. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I was more than happy to return the favor. The clerk at the permit office was a friendly-looking woman in her 50s. I gave her my best smile and slid a copy of my property deed across the counter. "I need to check on something. The HOA is trying to build a road around my property. Do they have a permit for that?" She frowned and typed something into her computer. A few seconds later, she let out a small chuckle. "They applied for one, but it hasn't been approved. The city denied their request last week." That was interesting. "Why?" She shook her head. "They don't own the land. It's part of a protected green space. They can't build anything there without a special exemption, and those take years to go through." I grinned. "So what happens if they try to build it anyway?" She gave me a knowing look. "They'd be facing some serious fines. And probably a lawsuit." That was all I needed to hear. By the time I got back home, the construction crew was still there, and Karen was standing nearby, overseeing the operation like some kind of war general. I strolled up to her with my hands in my pockets, enjoying the look of barely contained rage on her face. "Karen," I said, "you forgot to mention one little thing." She folded her arms. "What?" "The city denied your permit. This road isn't happening." She blinked. "That's impossible." I pulled out my phone and showed her the email confirmation I'd received from the clerk. "No permit, no road. If you keep digging, you'll be looking at some hefty fines." For the first time, Karen actually looked rattled. Her eyes darted to the construction workers, who had started murmuring amongst themselves. She knew she was caught. Then, like a true HOA president, she doubled down. "This isn't over," she snapped. "You can't just run a private business in a residential area. I'll have the mayor shut you down." I smirked. "You mean the same mayor whose brother just bought a toll pass from me yesterday?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing. That night, I celebrated with a beer on my porch while Karen fumed inside her house. The HOA had thrown everything they had at me, and they had lost at every turn. They had built a road on my land, and now they were stuck with it. But Karen wasn't done scheming. She still had one last desperate plan. And I had no doubt it was going to be the most ridiculous one yet. The HOA wasn't just defeated, they were humiliated. Karen had lost every battle she started, and yet, somehow, she refused to accept reality. I knew she was going to come up with something drastic, something desperate. And sure enough, it didn't take long before she tried her boldest, most ridiculous move yet. It started with an official-looking letter taped to my front door one morning. The envelope was stamped with the town's official seal, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe the city had finally caved to Karen's complaints. But when I opened it, I couldn't help but laugh. It was a formal notice from the mayor's office, requesting a meeting about a public concern regarding the unauthorized toll booth disrupting community access. I read it twice, then grabbed my phone and called Greg. "They're really going for it, huh?" he said, amusement laced in his voice. "Looks like it," I said. "They got the mayor involved. Any chance this actually sticks?" Greg let out a low chuckle. "Not a chance. But I'd go to the meeting anyway. Play along. See what they've got." That was good enough for me. If Karen thought she could outmaneuver me in a public setting, she was in for a rude awakening. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a stiff wooden chair inside the town hall, facing the mayor, Karen, and the rest of the HOA board. The room was packed with other local officials and even a few curious residents who had come to watch the fireworks. Karen was practically glowing with smugness. She sat next to the mayor like she owned the place, her arms crossed, a satisfied smirk tugging at her lips. I could already tell she thought this was going to be her big moment. The mayor cleared his throat. "All right, let's get started. Mr. Dawson, the reason we've asked you here today is to discuss concerns regarding your toll booth. We've received numerous complaints that it is creating an obstruction and negatively impacting community access. The HOA has requested that we take action to remove it." I nodded, pretending to look thoughtful. "I understand. Just for clarification, these complaints, they're mostly from HOA members, correct?" The mayor hesitated. "Well, yes." I leaned back in my chair. "Interesting. Because I've actually had a lot of non-HOA residents tell me they don't mind the toll road at all. Some of them even prefer it because it stops random drivers from speeding through the neighborhood." Karen let out a scoff. "Oh, please. No one prefers a toll road." I ignored her and turned back to the mayor. "Before we go any further, I just have one question. Who owns the land the road is on?" The mayor shifted uncomfortably. "Well, according to the records, you do." I nodded. "So just to be clear, the HOA built a road on my private property without permission. And now they're upset because I decided to put a toll on that road." Karen's smirk faltered just slightly, but she wasn't backing down. "The road was built for the benefit of the community," she said, voice sharp. "You're exploiting people for profit." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, kind of like how the HOA fines homeowners for having the wrong shade of curtains? Or charges ridiculous fees for community maintenance, while spending the money on nonsense." The room went silent. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably, and I could see a few of them nodding in agreement. The mayor let out a sigh. "Look, I understand there are tensions here, but the fact remains that the road is causing issues, and we need to find a resolution." I smiled. "I agree. And the easiest solution is for the HOA to remove the road. It's my land and they built it without my permission. So if they don't like my toll booth, they can just dig up the road and return my property to the way it was before." Karen's face turned red. She knew I had backed her into a corner. The HOA didn't have the funds to tear up the road, and even if they did, they couldn't force me to do anything without legal grounds. She clenched her jaw. "That's not realistic. Neither is expecting me to let people use my land for free," I said. The mayor rubbed his temples. "Mr. Dawson, is there any compromise you'd be willing to make?" I thought about it for a moment, then shrugged. "I'd be happy to lower the toll. Maybe even make it free for emergency vehicles and city workers. But as long as that road is on my property, I'm going to charge people to use it." Karen slammed her hands on the table. "This is outrageous. He can't just hold the community hostage like this." The mayor turned to her with an exhausted expression. Karen, legally, he can. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, her face twisting in frustration. I decided to twist the knife just a little bit more. Of course, if the HOA wants to buy the land from me, we can negotiate a price. I'd be willing to sell the road for, say, $500,000. Karen practically choked. That's insane. I shrugged. Supply and demand. The mayor looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. He let out a long sigh and rubbed his forehead. Look, I think we need to take some time to review all options. But as of right now, there's no legal action we can take against Mr. Dawson. Karen shot out of her chair so fast she nearly knocked it over. This isn't over, she hissed. I grinned. Oh, I hope not. I'm having way too much fun. She stormed out of the room, the rest of the HOA trailing behind her like lost puppies. As I walked out of the building, a few residents stopped me to shake my hand. One of them, an older man named Frank, clapped me on the back and laughed. I never thought I'd live to see someone out petty Karen. You're a legend, kid. I grinned. Thanks, Frank. But something tells me she's not done yet. And I was right. Because that night, my security camera caught Karen sneaking onto my property with a can of spray paint. She had apparently decided that if she couldn't win legally, she'd resort to vandalism. Unfortunately for her, I had police on speed dial, and by the time the cops arrived, Karen was caught red-handed, standing in front of my toll booth with the words, "Scammer," half-finished in bright red paint. She turned around slowly, her face pale as the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the scene. I stepped onto my porch with a cup of coffee, shaking my head. Karen, Karen, Karen. I really thought you were smarter than this. She didn't say a word as the cops led her away. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. Best $5 I ever made. Karen getting arrested was the best entertainment I had seen in years. The sight of her standing there, caught red-handed with a can of spray paint, was something I would replay in my head for a long time. It was poetic. The woman who had tried every possible scheme to take me down had finally sabotaged herself. The police didn't have to do much. My security cameras had recorded everything. She tried to weasel her way out of it, of course. The moment the officers cuffed her, she started spewing every excuse she could think of. It was a misunderstanding. She was just inspecting the toll booth. The paint can wasn't even hers. The best one was when she claimed she had been set up, as if I had somehow tricked her into grabbing a can of red spray paint in the middle of the night and vandalizing my property on camera. The officers weren't buying it. I could see it in their faces. They were tired of her. One of them, an officer named Daniels, had been dealing with her nonsense for years. I could tell from the way he sighed before reading her rights. I stood on my porch, watching as they put her in the squad car. She shot me a murderous glare through the window, her jaw clenched so tight I thought she might break a tooth. I just lifted my coffee cup in a silent toast. The next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. The HOA board had been scrambling all night, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Karen being arrested wasn't just embarrassing, it was a disaster for them. She had been their fearless leader, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, and now she was sitting in a holding cell because she couldn't control her temper. The local news even picked up the story. HOA president arrested for vandalizing private property was the headline that spread like wildfire. A couple of reporters even came by my house, but I wasn't interested in doing interviews. I just sat back and watched as Karen's perfect little world collapsed around her. By the end of the week, the HOA was in full-blown crisis mode. Some members tried to distance themselves from Karen, pretending they had never supported her decisions. Others desperately tried to spin the story, saying it was all a big misunderstanding. But the damage was done. Then came the emergency HOA meeting. I didn't attend, obviously. I wasn't part of the HOA, and I had no interest in listening to a bunch of entitled busybodies argue over how to save face. But I did get the highlights from my neighbor, Tom, who had been more than happy to fill me in. It was a disaster. Karen, now out on bail, had shown up looking like a woman on the edge. She tried to defend herself, claiming she had been provoked, that I had forced her hand. But the rest of the board was done with her. They knew she was a liability. The vote to remove her as HOA president wasn't even close. Karen was out. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was free from her reign of terror. Without her, the HOA started to fall apart. It turned out that most of the people on the board had just been following her lead, and without her barking orders, they had no idea what they were doing. Meetings became unorganized messes. Rules that had once been enforced with an iron fist were suddenly ignored. Fines went unpaid. People started questioning why they were even paying HOA fees in the first place. And just like that, the entire thing collapsed. A month after Karen's downfall, the HOA officially disbanded. It was over. The first thing people did was celebrate. It was like the whole neighborhood had been holding its breath for years, and now they were finally free to exhale. Someone threw a barbecue. Someone else set off fireworks. People tore down the ridiculous HOA-mandated decorations in their yards and painted their houses whatever colors they wanted. It was glorious. And Karen? She packed up and left. She put her house on the market and moved out of town, too humiliated to stay. No one was sad to see her go. But the best part? I bought her house. The moment I saw it listed, I made an offer, and within a few weeks it was mine. It was petty, I won't lie. But after everything she had put me through, I couldn't resist. I didn't even move in. I turned it into a community space. A little park with benches and a sign that read, Karen Memorial Park in honor of HOA tyrants everywhere. People loved it. And the toll road? Oh, that stayed. Even though the HOA was gone, the road was still on my property, and I saw no reason to take down the toll booth. People still used it, and I still collected my fee. But now, with the HOA out of the picture, I started offering discounts. Free passes on holidays. A loyalty program. Some people still grumbled about it, but most just laughed. In the end, I had won. I had taken everything Karen had tried to steal from me and turned it into my victory. And every time I sat on one of the benches in Karen Memorial Park, watching cars line up at the toll booth, I couldn't help but smile. Some battles are worth fighting, and some wins, they're worth every single penny.